how are you today?
How are you?
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. I really, with the pandemic going on right now, there's so many issues in regards to housing, and that's what we're going to be focusing on. And there's been so many seminars about mortgages, getting help with your mortgage, and also the stimulus. But there are other issues that I noticed that were not being addressed, and I wanted to kind of just have you share. That's why I called you. Wanted you to share about from an attorney perspective. A lot of people might be in trouble or unexpectedly didn't know that something might happen to a loved one, or they have to deal with some challenging issues right now, and they'll need an attorney. So I figured it'd be ideal to have you come and speak and share, like, what are some of the things we should be looking out for. So thank you everyone for joining us. I want to introduce myself, which I should have done first. I'm Turnquest. I'm the broker owner of Wealth Properties Management. I'm also the vice president of the Western New York chapter of Board of Realtors, which is the organization. We're a chapter of the National Association of Real Estate Brokers, and we promote democracy in housing amongst African Americans since 1947. We were in existence because we didn't have the organization or the support. We came into existence because we didn't have support as real estate professionals to help people of color become we didn't have that trade association. So this network was developed in 1947, and it still exists today. And we're still out here fighting for democracy and housing for African Americans. So thank you so much for joining us. And I have today's guest is an attorney in Syracuse, New York, Felicia Davis. Thank you so much. If you could introduce yourself, please.
Sure, thanks for having me. I'm an attorney. I've been an attorney for 26 years. The first areas of the law that I worked in was real estate. So this is sort of my stomping grounds where my career really started. Currently, I'm running for Syracuse City Court Judge, and we have an upcoming primary. And I've been out in full-time private practice for about 8.5, 9 years. And so my practice base has just exploded. Previously, I really didn't do criminal law. I do criminal law all the way to having a 20-year history of doing cases that concern civil rights and discrimination types of cases, whether it's sexual harassment all the way to false imprisonment and religious and intolerance cases as well. And then everything in between: personal injury, Social Security, disability, workers' compensation, all of those things.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, this is great in your African American in our area, able to assist us. Absolutely. Thank you. I was so happy to have found you when I needed you to help me in the selling of my property here in Syracuse. So thank you so much again.
Thank you for being a
This segment is called Getting Your Business in Order, and we wanted to basically have you start out and share what are some of the things that we really should be focusing on now or be concerned about right now. In terms of housing, I know you mentioned people might, since without having a job, there might be some issues that they have to prepare for coming out of this pandemic that we're dealing with right now.
So particular to New York State, our governor has taken a very proactive stance as it comes to most of the basic issues that affect the residents of New York. So as it pertains to rents and rentals, which also include not just residential, but each form of rental agreements, is really to put a stay on the collection of rents. Now, what that does is it disallows owners and lessors from requiring payment demanding payment. What it doesn't necessarily do is dilute or expunge that outstanding bill. But it does give you breathing room between the bill and when it's due. So that's in regards to rents. In regards to mortgages, there has been national talk about mortgages being put in suspension, and you actually do have a federal agency that is working on giving forbearance. Now, forbearance is not the extinguishment of the debt. What it does,
yes,
elongates the debt and gives you time to pay it, with there being a span of time for which no payments or a lesser payment will be accepted. What I do understand that's both happening both on the state and the federal level is that interest that would normally accumulate monthly on a mortgage payment or on a mortgage amount will be held in abeyance, which means you won't owe it, and I don't believe it can even roll forward. But it's only during the months for which there is the shelter in place as it pertains to COVID-19.
Thank you. We're also hearing on our end that some banks might be working on modifications for individuals as well. But definitely want to get in touch with your mortgage company to find out what they're able to do. So thank you on that note. Also, some people may have lost their jobs or might be looking to relocate. I know we talked about that briefly in terms of the months are coming ahead. Some of the things that they should be looking to do now in terms of getting their home and everything in order. I know you were going to share some things. Well, I know also as a real estate agent, if you're looking to relocate or let's say if you're preparing to sell, this is an opportunity time for you to really start looking and planning curb appeal, if that's something that you're looking to do as an option, which I can easily assist you with that in that area. Not that we're encouraging to do that, but if you have options while you're on this downtime, it would be ideal to do that as well. Also, in regards to estate planning, you had mentioned that, which is a concern. People are finding themselves in situations now that they weren't prepared for at all. I know I have family in New York City, and we've had some loss through friends and family, and that's, I guess, a touchy area, but still something that we should know about. Could you share with us?
So oftentimes, as people of color, we don't necessarily take stock of what should be considered assets. We're not often trained to look at our lives and what we hold dear as a legacy. And so too often we are just about working, getting our paycheck or our streams of income and keeping it moving without really preparing to be able to pass on wealth to ensure that those who are coming behind us are not only receiving something, but that we really make them our successors and that we really teach them about legacy. And so estate planning is a way to do that. And when I say estate planning, what am I talking about? I'm talking about being able to organize your business financially and the properties that you own. So looking at that collectivity as your wealth or collectively as your wealth, how do I get it from being in my ownership to that of my children? If you don't happen to have children, whoever you choose to be your beneficiaries. The easiest way or the most typical instrument or document that does that is a will. So often we have loved ones who pass unexpectedly and or just become older, and before they reach the stages of where they're dealing with elderly issues like dementia and Alzheimer's, we haven't had those conversations.
Yes.
And so what COVID-19 has done is sped up. It's brought what we had been doing on the daily and brought, unfortunately, as you were speaking about with your family, some of your family and friends downstate, unexpected death and the everyday clashed. And
Yes.
so one of the things that we all need to do, and that includes myself, is begin to plan out who are our beneficiaries. If you are married under New York state law, your spouse is a necessary beneficiary. You cannot uninherit or disinherit a spouse. They are due a certain portion. But if you don't have a spouse, or your spouse, you're divorced, or your spouse is deceased, then it's wide open as to who you can make your beneficiary. If you have children and you yet have a spouse, if that child is 18 or under, they are an automatic beneficiary. And so just kind of think along the lines of who would you consider to be your beneficiary? That's number one. And then once you think about who you would want to be your beneficiary, then you begin to think about those things that you own, those things that you have an interest in. Being able to secure that or to be able to pass that on to them. Usually you can do it through a will. If there are current circumstances by which you have the ability to do lump sums, you can also do it through trust. Trust is an instrument that allows you, the person, also known legally as the settlor of the trust, to appoint somebody to be the trustee. And then that individual who you appoint obviously has to be trustworthy, has to be savvy enough to be able to handle whatever assets you put into the trust, to then be able to pass that dollars and cents on, that property, whatever the thing is, which is what legal terms we call it, the corpus or the body of what's in the trust, onto who you consider to be your beneficiary. So you don't always have to do things after death. You can do them during your lifetime. And usually the instrument or the document known as a trust is a way to transfer wealth. In regards to, you need to also be thinking about what are the tax benefits and the tax liabilities of doing it. And so you need to look at, they're really governed by the amounts that you want to transfer or give to your beneficiaries. And so generally there is a deduction for estate monies up to $5 million. So if your estate is smaller than that, 9 times out of 10, you can pass on your wealth through trust, through your will, and there really won't be a federal negative tax impact to what you're transferring. The other thing, and I'm not really sure how the insurance industry is dealing with COVID-19, or even what they're telling their agents and their underwriting about people who are seeking new insurance policies. But that's another means of acquiring or passing on wealth that does not have to go through the courts. So when you do a will, and even if you don't have a will, before those who are your beneficiaries can take a hold of it, if it is something more like a house, like real property, yes, it has to go through court, which is known as probate or surrogates, depending on your county. But insurance policies are just that, they're contracts. So they operate outside of going to the courts, because the individual who's entered the contract has already laid out the proportions and the individual who should be the beneficiary. So the courts don't control insurances. So there are so many wide ranges of insurance products, from whole life to term to annuities, that you really need to start looking at those things. Maybe you hadn't really thought about it, but really look at it as a way of securing legacy. Life is so precious, and oftentimes we encounter situations, and it doesn't always necessarily result, thank God, in us becoming, dying, but we could become incapacitated. Right. And that has the same effect on our family. So thinking about what are your assets, who are your beneficiaries, how you want to get that benefit to them, and then going forward, kind of biting the bullet and getting to those professionals who can get it done for you.
Okay. That's very helpful. So let's say you're that person that didn't have any of that in place, and you have a home, and the person who was the head of the home had passed on, and now you're like, what do I do? What would be someone's first step in trying to figure out, how do I handle everything, for those people who hadn't planned? Like, what would you suggest their first step would be?
Well, one of the first things that individuals really need to think about, and I just want to spin this out, even as you're now looking at the possibility of purchasing properties. Oftentimes we get mortgages, but we don't also get insurance policies to cover paying that thing off, right? So if the main wage earner, or you're in partnership and you're in a marriage, that other contributor is no longer there to contribute, there's going to be a problem financially. And so what happens to the flow of income when there is no more, or it's lessened? Because some people don't only just lose their jobs, but they're downgraded, right? So their income can change. One of the things to look into when you are securing a mortgage is the ability to get a policy that covers the mortgage as well, that in the event something happens to you or the other owner on the property, it will be paid off. Okay, so then you will own your property outright, and it becomes a true asset without any liens and without any debt on it. Okay, so that's one concern. If that exists, make sure you go through the process to secure getting your property paid off. If you don't have that in place, then you need to assess what are your needs. If that other contributor, that other loved one is no longer in the home, do you want to stay in the home, right? Is it too big? All of the different considerations that you need to take a look at. If you decide that it is where you want to stay, then again, it rolls you back into how can I afford it? Do I need to ask for forbearance? Do I need to ask for modification? Because the circumstances are different. And those are when you ask for modification or forbearance, you are dealing with the lender.
Okay.
The mortgage, right? So usually you have a mortgage servicer, and then you have the bank or the entity that lended you the money, right? So sometimes, usually they're in step with each other. The mortgage processor is where you usually send your payments, right? And then they get it to the actual lender. You have to make sure that they're in step, because sometimes there can be side agreements that affect your mortgage, where when things went awry in 2009,
yes,
and under President Obama, where he gave relief to homeowners, not all existing mortgage agreements had that language,
okay.
right? So some mortgage agreements, depending on their age, predated, right, the bubble, and it didn't have language that would allow you to take benefit from the HARP legacy, right? In terms of, being able to seek modifications, they have to give you certain notices. If they don't, then they can't take you into foreclosure. That was the HARP. But President Trump allowed those things to expire, right? So now COVID-19 has brought us back into the place where the federal government and local governments, state governments, have to deal with the pandemic and its effect on homeowners, right? So this is sort of a pandemic bringing back the HARP benefits to homeowners. So look and talk to your lenders and your mortgage companies about forbearance, about modifications.
So I'm sorry, I just wanted to ask, so if the person who took out the mortgage passed on,
correct,
and now you're the family member, are you automatically able to take it over? Is that?
It depends on your credit. So let me explain it this way. So let's just say you have a parent, right? And the parent is the homeowner, and something happens to them, right? You generally have a window.
Okay.
You can contact the lender to say, and they would want to see a certified death certificate that this individual has passed. The lender will not give you information if you have not made application to become the administrator of the estate. So even if there is no will, you have to have legal status to get information, because then companies would be violating the owner's right to privacy.
Okay.
Okay, so for example, you couldn't just call the lender. You could, and some people would work with you, but generally they need to know that you have the legal right to transact business on behalf of the individual who's no longer present.
Okay.
That process is either you having the will go through court, because you are the executor of the estate. So the person has, by their will, indicated who they want to handle their business after their death, or you go through the process where there is no will, but you're asking the court to recognize you as the individual who will make decisions on behalf of anything owned by the person who has died. And that means in New York State, that's called applying to become an administrator. So you would have to make either of those steps. If there's a will, you have to go through the court, so that if you're the executor, the individual identified as this is the go-to person to handle all business to conclusion, or you'd have to go to the courts to say, hey, I want to step in these shoes because of my relationship. I'm the son or daughter, I'm the niece or nephew, whatever your connection to the person who has died. And then the courts will give you letters of either administration if there's no will, or letters of testamentary power if you are the executor. That gives you the legal right to transact business on behalf of the person who has passed.
Wow.
Then you can go to the lender and you can say, hey, this is the person's estate. Their only asset was this house.
Wow.
Okay. And they have, under the law, they have 4 possible individuals who are beneficiaries. Of them, 2 of them are minors, right? So they can't, a minor in New York State is anybody 18 years or younger, right? Or you fall in the category of being one of those beneficiaries and you are interested, you have the financial wherewithal and the credit rating to then assume the mortgage.
Okay.
Okay, so that is an avenue to do it. Or you're able to get your own loan to buy the house outright. So you don't necessarily have to assume the terms of the existing mortgage. You can, basically buy the house and be under your own mortgage for it.
Wonderful, wonderful. Sounds like you should have actually more than one person listed on your deed if possible.
Yes, that is another way to do it in terms of estate planning. We were talking about a trust. Another way to hold property is to transfer the ownership of your property into a trust.
Okay.
You have a trustee managing, and if something were to happen to you, that trustee can then still deal with the property, because even though you're getting the benefit of it, you're still living in the property, you're not the legal owner on title, even though you're the beneficial owner by being able to stay there.
That's awesome. Okay, that's powerful to know in advance. Yes. And I guess someone, if they were in a situation where they not on the deed and it's a family member that passed, they should call you.
Until I'm elected.
Now, another thing we talked about is policy. I know I'm involved in civic engagement, and right now we are coming upon an election, and we're, I know some people are very concerned, or maybe not as concerned. I also involved in the census as well, and we really encouraging people to not let the pandemic get them so concerned that they say, forget about the census, forget about the election, I'm not voting. I know we saw in Wisconsin, people came out and stood on lines with their mask on so that they could vote. So I know when we talk about voting, we're also talking about policies. And I know when we spoke briefly, we need people not to sleep, so to speak, and understand that, all of these things coming up have an impact on policy. And if you can kind of share, what we were talking about briefly, it'd be great. Thank you.
Sure. So one of the things I encourage anybody listening or viewing this is to know that your right to vote is so precious, that individuals who look like us were beaten, they were lynched, they were run out of town, all of those things, so we would have the right to vote, right? And so even with a pandemic going on, so if you can imagine going back, and I was listening to you talk about the age of the National Realtors Association from 1946, right? So Realtist, yes. That what was going on socially in 1946 and how it affected people who were, I don't like to use the term minorities, but people of color or the poor, because oftentimes we don't differentiate the issues because we tend to only think they exist based on race, but we know they also exist based on economics. But with that said, the right to vote is the right to determine who will speak on your behalf.
Right.
And so if you don't like the current speakers, then the only way to ensure that you shut them up is to exercise your right to vote. The policies that are in place now, without the individual governors taking the time to protect their residents, what's going on nationally does not protect us individually. And so with the pandemic, please don't lose your power. Please go to the polls. And what do I mean by go to the polls? Some states are doing absentee ballot voting. Don't ignore it. If the process is for you to request the ballot in order for you to vote by mail, please do that. If you request the ballot, not only fill it out, but please mail it, because that is your voice. So make sure you send your voice out. Secondarily, once things are reopened, and we know that there are some states who have begun to reopen up business and government, please go out and vote. Those who really don't care about urban areas, those who are not in favor of pro-democracy and basic issues of housing, employment, even as it pertains to how we worship. All of those rights and privileges will continue to be infringed if we do not vote. I'm running for a local office here in the city of Syracuse to become a judge. I didn't just decide overnight that I wanted to run to become a judge, but after 26 years of being an attorney in a variety of positions, not all attorneys are in court waging trials, but sometimes, different cases have you in the background and you are making law by how you deal with that individual's case. I say all of that to say, even if the law is on your side, if you don't have an even playing field in that courtroom, it doesn't matter. Your rights can still be negatively impacted. So I'm running because I know I'm the kind of judge that would ensure that not only is the courtroom a fair playing ground, but that every party, if it's in a criminal situation, whether you're the district attorney or you're the defense counsel, you are going to go forward to protect rights, that you are going to fulfill the duties that we take an oath to do. And so it takes a very perceptive judge. It takes a judge that has had experience dealing with real people. You don't understand facts unless you understand people, right? Because cases just don't end up in court. People have conflict. People do things that bring us before the court. So if you don't really just have a grassroots understanding of people, of culture, of language, of socioeconomics, of history, and of policy, then you're going to short circuit the process. And so again, don't allow the pandemic to become a crutch or an excuse so that you are not responsible to the vote, because it still matters.
It is, and we see that on a federal level as well, and I don't know if people are aware, but they're affecting policy. Even our voting rights are being impacted by policies that they're taking away, or bills that they are chopping up a little bit, removing, sending things back to different states, making it so that different states are able to choose. And if we're not out there making our voice heard by voting, we will definitely be shorted. So don't let this pandemic really keep you from the polls, please. And also the census. We have all these, we're going to be impacted by a lot of these cuts, or economically, and services are going to be cut. And if we don't get our numbers in, if we're not registering with the census, the numbers will go down, and it'll say to any area, we don't need these services. So, we want to really encourage everyone filling out those census. So important, so important. and just remember the saying that you said, we're talking about getting our business in order, but I liked how you said something in regards to policy. Oh gosh, I forget the saying you said, but it just hit on the nose. I don't have it on me. But just know that don't let any of this change you from thinking that you still don't count, because you do matter, And I'm just so happy. I live in New York State, and they are really, our politicians here are looking out and for us and for the country. And we're hoping that everyone takes this seriously and doesn't get short-sighted. So I want to thank you so much for, and we'll see each other again. And, yes, and good luck. We're not endorsing, we don't endorse, but we wish you the best, and I look forward to working with you. And if people want to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Okay, so you can do it a variety of ways, but if you want to reach out to me on Facebook, you can just look me up as Felicia Davis. And Felicia is spelled Felicia, obviously Davis, Davis. I also can be reached by email at felicia.davis268@yahoo.com. And definitely reach out. I mean, there are just so many issues, so many things that you can benefit from in dealing with a professional. Why not deal with someone who has been touched by the same issues that you face, and is able to give you some guidance, able to give you empathy, and able to definitely work for your interests.
Thank you so much. And I'm Chanel Turnquest, and hopefully I'll have some more segments coming your way. Thank you so much, Felicia.
All right.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.